Welcome to Boundless Creativity, a Coptic bookbinding tutorial. First, you will need to prepare your covers. Use a piece of cardboard or very thick cardstock. I used the backing from a pad of paper that I had already used up, and I covered it with some fabric, just using regular white school glue, and on the inside I applied a piece of cardstock to seal it all in. In order to make sure that the glue stuck and dried properly, I used wax paper and some paper clips to stick the corners and put them under a very heavy book to dry overnight. You can decorate your cover with whatever you like, including decorative paper, scrapbooking paper, or anything that you feel would represent the vision for your sketchbook. So here I am decorating my cover. I chose to use some fabric that had a really interesting pattern. I cut out that pattern and then I used hot glue to attach that to my cover. I also show at the end of this video how I made a button closure for the entire book, so you can see that at the end or skip to the end if that's what you would like to see how to do. And I encourage you to decorate your cover to represent something about you or something about your creative process. Maybe the cover will inspire you to make a certain kind of art inside of the sketchbook. Really use your creativity here and feel free to use whatever you would like to decorate your cover. We will begin to fold our paper to create the signatures for our book. I used 11 by 17 printer paper to make my sketchbook. You can use whatever size paper you desire. Depending on the size of the cover that you used, you will need paper approximately twice the size of your cover so that you can fold it. You'll want to fold enough pieces of paper to create signatures of 5. You'll see here I am stacking the signatures together in groups of 5, one within the other, and I eventually made 8 signatures of 5 pages. I would recommend the minimum number of signatures would be 3, so 3 times 5 you'll need at least 15 pieces of paper. And of course, you can do as many signatures as you would like, just folding in increments of 5 and stacking them together to create your signatures. Now I'm creating a binding template, which will help me to arrange the location of the holes for the cover and for the signatures. So I'm measuring the middle of my piece of paper and marking the center, and then deciding how far apart I want each of the holes, which I eventually decided would be 1.5 inches, and that ended up giving me 7 holes. Now I'm going to use that template to punch the binding holes into my signatures. So I simply folded it inside out and placed it into the middle of one of my signatures, using an awl and holding it with my pointer finger up the awl point with the signature flat on my surface. I carefully pushed the awl through the holes all the way across my signature, doing that and repeating it with all of my individual signatures. Now I need to punch my holes into the covers, so I am measuring a line a 1/2 inch from the edge of my covers and using the template to mark where my holes are going to go. Using the awl, I'm going to punch a hole all the way to the hilt of the awl, or the metal part, to binding the book using the Coptic method. First, I'm measuring the amount of thread or string that I'm going to need. You can use a wax-covered type of string specifically made for bookbinding, which is what I'm using here, or you can use embroidery thread. If using embroidery thread, I recommend doubling it up onto your needle and tying the knot at the end. You can see here I'm just threading my needle with the bookbinding thread without tying both ends together. Instead, I'm tying one knot onto one string, and I'm passing the tail end of that thread through the loop several times and then finally pulling it tight. This creates a larger knot, which will prevent it from pulling through your holes as you start your binding process. Again, if you're using embroidery thread and this is your first time making a book, double it up and make your knot with both ends of the thread. You'll start with one of your signatures and the cover, grabbing your needle and thread and pushing the needle through the inside of your first signature and the bottom hole of your front cover. You're going to pull that string all the way through until your knot stops on the inside of the signature, and then you're passing your needle under the piece of thread between the signature and the cover so that it loops and locks onto the cover. Then you're going to stick your needle back into that hole we just came out of and pull your thread all the way back to the inside until it is tight. Coming back through the center of the signature, out the next hole and the corresponding hole of the cover, pull that thread all the way through and pass the needle underneath that little thread between the signature and the cover. Pull tight, secure that loop, and you'll pass that needle back into the hole you just came out of, pulling the thread all the way into the signature. Sometimes you'll get knots. Just be patient and get those untangled before you proceed. Making sure that each time you are tightening your thread, you want it to be pulled all the way to the edge of that cover, not to the holes. This will ensure you have a nice tight binding at the end. And you're just going to repeat this process as you continue up your corresponding holes. So again, as you go through, you're going to come through the middle of the signature, out that hole, through the corresponding hole of the cover, pull the thread all the way through and under, and then back inside. You'll find that this process is very repetitive and it can be quite soothing as well once you get used to it. So just being patient with the steps of the process, and of course pause this video if you need to go back to a step or to see it again. So you can see here I'm just repeating the process with my cover and my first signature, pulling tight each time. You can see my signatures lined up with the edge of the cover, always pulling tight, going back into the hole that you just came out of, and finishing here with the last hole of this first signature, and continuing to loop under, which secures your binding. And you can see it is secured. And then we will start the next signature. So we lay it on top and we pass our needle back through the first hole of our next signature rather than going back into the signature we previously started. And then we are pretty much repeating the process, except you can see my needle goes here under the loop of the last signature's binding so that it will secure to the bottom signature. And then we go back into that same hole, pull through, and repeat the process. So again, we loop under the binding of the previous signature and then pull tight and go back into the hole we just came out of. Just continuing as we go along, allowing our needle to go under the binding of the Coptic binding method, which is the braided look of the bindings when you're finished. So I'm getting close here to the last hole of the second signature. And when you're using this method where your threads are not doubled up and knotted at the end, sometimes your thread will come off of the needle, so you'll just need to rethread it. Take some practice to continue holding on to those two threads. The last binding here, thread under, place the next signature on top, and again we go into that corresponding hole of the next signature, and we're going to pretty much repeat that process, but the next signature and the subsequent signatures, we're going to stick our needle between the first signature and the second signature, and we're going to loop it around that binding. So you can see my needle comes out the other side, and I pull that tight, and then I go back in to the hole I just came out of. So we'll see that again, coming out of the signature, sticking my needle between the two first signatures, which allows me to flip them open and then pass the needle around the binding and out the other side. And then we go back in to the hole we just came out of. Again, out the hole, pass between the folds of the first two signatures, out the other side, pull tight, and that creates the loop that we need, and passing it back into the hole we just came out of. Got a little knot here, so I'm just undoing that, pulling tight each time, back out the next hole, using the needle to flip open between the first two signatures, loop around that binding, come back inside, and repeat that process. Looping around the previous binding as you go along. And rather than going back into that last hole, again, we're going to layer the next signature on top and repeat the process. So these next few signatures will be much quicker here. It's just exactly the same process that you started. As you continue to add on your signatures, just remember that each time you are pulling your string completely tight, that you are looping around the previous binding by flipping open the pages with your needle and passing the needle around that binding, and then going back into the hole you previously came out of, unless of course you're adding another signature on top. You're going to continue that process until you have no more signatures left, and then just stop when you finish your last signature to attach the back cover. When you're ready to add your back cover, just lay it on top of your signatures, and you're going to put your needle through the bottom hole of that back cover, and then you're going to loop your needle under the space of the thread between the cover and the signatures, and then you're going to push your needle into the last hole of the last signature, coming into the middle of the last signature, and you're going to move up back through the same holes you've used, continuing to loop under and back into the last hole of that last signature. And you can see here at the end I just added a few extra stitches for good measure, and I tied on a knot a few times, about 4 times, to the threads inside. And then you can just flip through and see how nicely they all lay flat, just double checking it's all tight. You can see you get this beautiful braided Coptic method binding when you're all finished. Decided I wanted to add a button closure to my book, so I used a button and my awl to put a hole through the front cover and a couple of holes through the back cover. I used my extra thread from the binding to create a loop at the back, just knotting it and creating a couple loops there, so I could thread that around the button at the front, which I attached with some hot glue. And you did it! You made your own hand-bound sketchbook. Congratulations! Enjoy